Hello and welcome to the Adobe Twitch channel. My name is Terry White, Worldwide Design and Photography Evangelist for Adobe. And welcome to twitch.tv/Adobe. It's my pleasure today to bring on a special guest. It's actually my first guest on my own stream and on my show. And Nathaniel's going to be doing some portrait retouching. So the way this is going to work, it's going to be a 2-hour stream. Nathaniel's going to go ahead and do an hour of portrait retouching. I'm going to go ahead and do an hour after that of retouching from a recent shoot I did this past weekend. So it's going to be Photoshop. It's going to be, yeah, I know his audio is a bit low, John. I'll try and boost it as much as I can. And Nathaniel, I'm going to have you talk right into your mic, scream so they can hear you when it's your time. But anyway, very happy to bring Nathaniel on. And without further ado, Nathaniel, take it away. Talk loud so they can hear you. I know your audio is a little bit lower than mine.
Well, I got the microphone right in my mouth now, so hopefully I won't blow anything out.
All right.
Yeah, so we're just going to take a look at doing a little retouching here. Those of you that follow my channel know that I did kind of this 12-part series on sort of the art of the retouch. But for those of you that haven't seen any of that content or those videos, I'm going to sort of walk through how I take a photo. It's just a photo shot on location right outside of the Art Museum in downtown Philadelphia. Take it from the raw image to more of a finished product. We'll at least do as much of it as we can over the course of this hour, and I think it'll be a whole lot of fun. So, with that in mind, the first thing that I generally am looking for when I shoot a photo, and it all begins obviously before you even come into Photoshop. I'm looking to get a great photo. This was shot with a Canon 5D Mark II. I believe I was using like a 70-200 millimeter lens. Would have been shot at something like f8, so I got great sharpness on my subject. And knowing that I want to drop the background just kind of semi out of focus. I mean, I don't have like that rich, creamy, bokeh, but you can definitely still see some detail, but it's very, very much blurred. I would have been shooting at probably f8 or so, but zoomed in at least 200 millimeters, maybe even 200 millimeters to get great separation between my model here and the background. So that's the first thing. And Center City, Philadelphia is probably about a mile to a mile and a half behind where I was with the model. So that longer telephoto lens is really compressing things for us. We get this great separation. So that's number one. Number two is it is a RAW file. It's a 16-bit file. We're going to go over how to get that if you're not familiar. But the first thing I like to do is when I open my image, you're going to be opening it up in Camera Raw Editor, which many of you are familiar with. And if you're using Lightroom, it's a very similar set of tools that you have, at least initially, with kind of your exposure and contrast settings, things like that. Yeah, here I am. Okay, so I'm at 90 millimeters f8. So that's about what I thought it was. The first thing I look to do is, number one, we can get rid of stuff like this little bit of haziness up here, which was either the big 7-foot parabolic umbrella I had over here to the right, or it's just some kind of vignetting from a filter or something I was using. I don't remember, but I'll begin with something like a graduated filter here, just zoom out, and I'll just hit that with just double click on these sliders to reset them. That's a little absurd that it's that much. I'll just go to 0.7 or so, and I'll just look to bring this in, drag this green point back. Maybe I need to boost my exposure a touch until I kind of level things out just a little bit. It's never going to be 100% perfect, but we can get it kind of close. All right, so something like that's probably good. We can continue to mess with vignette options and things like that, although it's not the best way to get rid of just a little bit of haziness in one corner. And we can finish it off in Photoshop if we absolutely need to. I just like to make sure that it's kind of faded into the image nicely. All right, so I'll just grab the hand tool here, get back to my other settings. The key thing for me when I'm retouching photos, generally speaking, I like to, with the RAW file, reduce contrast, bring back as much detail in both my shadows and my highlights. So almost always, it's not like biblical or anything, but almost always, I'll go ahead and I'll reduce contrast to some degree. So you can see, I mean, I'm bringing back some of the detail and things in the trees. And not that I'm losing detail necessarily, but just by killing off some contrast, I can always selectively add contrast later on in Photoshop, courtesy of some adjustment layers, some masking, things like that. So that's great. Highlights, particularly useful if either you've overlit your subject a little bit or if your sky is a little blown out. Same thing for the white slider. Highlights are generally going to target sort of like the mid-tone slice of the brightness, whereas whites are going to get that really tip, or the brightest of the brights in your image. A little clarity boost can be nice. You got to go really easy on the clarity. It can really make things look bad in a hurry.
Yeah, clarity, especially on a subject that should be soft, will definitely make a subject look harder. So
the clarity slider is one of those interesting sliders that if you take it too far in either direction, and sometimes it push it either direction, it can really start to make things look really bad in a hurry. So I try to go light on that. I don't think I need anything in the point curve here. I do like to add a little bit of sharpness. I'll just double click here on my magnifying glass to zoom into 100%. I do like to add a little sharpness typically when I'm working in camera raw. This is not like my final sharpening pass. I just like to throw a little sharpness in there. And when I'm dealing with an image where I have large areas of, one solid color, it's a good idea to use the masking slider just to kind of cut back on the amount of noise that a sharpening would introduce into massive, singular colored areas like the big gray sky behind us, things like that. It's a good idea to just, I'm not doing anything super scientific. Again, I'm not being super duper picky about it. Just kind of, touch and feel. HSL.
Yeah. Nathaniel, that's one of those things that always comes up whenever I show. I'm glad to hear what you just said, but that's one of the things that always comes up when I show this on my channel. People always say, "Well, I thought I heard you're supposed to do sharpening at the end or in the middle, or why you're doing it at the beginning." And I always jokingly, but really kind of seriously say, I do it in the beginning, at least in Lightroom, so I don't forget. So what's your rationale for, I know you added a little bit up front and you said you could, of course, that's not your final sharpening method, but when people ask you when is best to sharpen, what do you usually say?
I do, honestly, whenever you feel like it. To me, it's totally personal preference. I mean, I definitely think the best sharpening, that's actually a bad answer. The best sharpening is, you want to add it at the end because it's after you've done your retouching. It's after you've healed blemishes on the skin. I mean, let's say you're working with a model who has a big, okay, I'll give you an example. I did some work for a plastic surgeon who did, like major reconstructive surgery on these men and women's faces. I mean, I'm talking like facial cancers where like they had holes in their nostrils and, large chunks of like flesh missing from their skin. And just incredible work that this doctor does. But there's still some touch-up stuff that, we would need to do. We're trying to send some portraits home with these clients, and, they're understandably a little self-conscious about some of this stuff. So they would want to touch up some things here and there. And the last thing in the world I would want is to load up an image with sharpening up front and then go in and just essentially retouch away a lot of the sharpening that I've applied to, let's say, the skin on somebody's face, because all of those little details are going to be accentuated by your sharpening. That being said, I do still like to add a little bit of sharpening initially just to make sure there's a bevy of sharpening, kind of a bed of sharpening laid down. And then my finished sharpening comes when I have my tones, my textures, everything in place at the end. Because then it's kind of like you're putting the bow on the photo. You're just making sure everything looks the way it needs to be looks the way it needs to look, excuse me. And of course, you can always mask sharpening. And maybe if we can get to it in this tutorial, we'll talk about masking and masking sharpening, per color channel or something. To really help target that sharpening in via, some high frequency separation, and targeting, like the red channel, for instance, in the case of this girl, to help just kind of lock the sharpening in more or less on her skin, very naturally fade it in the shadowy parts of the image that probably don't need nearly as much sharpening. So that's part of the reason I like to do it at the end, because your image is kind of set. You can lock everything in and just provide this one nice kind of coat of sharpening over the whole thing. And just lock the image up and you're ready to rock and roll. But as far as adding sharpening early on, for me, totally personal preference. You can hate it, you can love it. Some people go overboard with it. Some people do absolutely no sharpening. And it's not wrong either way, in my mind. So with all of that in mind, I do like to hit workflow options here. And this is where you would specify to just work with a 16-bit per channel image. Super important. Again, if you're working with raw images, take advantage of the depth you have. It's something like 4,000 levels of lightness and color and everything that you're going to have in your lightness and tone that you'll have in a raw 16-bit image. Technically 12-bit with most cameras, but whatever. Whereas an 8-bit image, you got like 256, so not so cool. I'm not going to resize this to fit anything. So 16-bit image, and then I'll just hit OK, and it's going to just prepare my smart object, kind of reshuffle things for me here. And voila, there we go. You can see even the little darkening up in the corner has kind of gone away a little bit. All right, so Generally, the first thing I'll do when I get a image into Photoshop, and this is kind of a breakdown of like the step-by-step process, what comes first. I like to do any kind of shape shifting, a major body or object manipulation. So for instance, if I wanted to get rid of this tree over here, I could just take my lasso tool and just, loop up around this and go ahead and fill this or clone it in, whatever I think works best. To be a little more non-destructive, maybe I would create a new layer, name this Sky Fix or something. And I could grab, where is it here? My clone stamp tool under the hotkeys S, so I'll just bring it up with that. Because I'm working on a new blank layer, I'll just make sure that my sampling is set to current and below. Kind of important. I'll go ahead and right click, make the brush size a little larger even than this. One of the things that I find kind of interesting and useful, in fact, when I'm using my clone stamp tool, ignore that, is oftentimes you're going to feel like you're going to get a better clone if you use a soft edge clone stamp. It's going to work in this case because our background is blurred out. But when you're cloning on a foreground object that has a lot of sharp edges and sharpness built in, it's usually a good idea, and you're generally going to get better results if you use a harder edged clone stamp. Maybe not perfectly hard edged, but definitely you don't want one of these kind of big billowing soft edge clone stamps. All right, so I'm just going to hold down my Alt Option key, just sample out here in the sky somewhere, maybe increase the opacity of the tool, about 90 or so. We'll just mix it up here and see what we get. And really, honestly, I should probably feather the edge of this selection as well, but we're not going to mess around with that. If you're doing it for a client, go ahead and take all the time in the world. All right, Command or Control D, you can see I've got kind of a hard edge there. So I can throw a layer mask on this layer and grab my brush tool. The hotkey is the letter B. Got some old brushes here, so I'll just replace these with the basic brushes. Hit OK. Let's see here. I'll take like the 100 pixel soft edge brush. Need to make it a little bit larger. Pick it up around 200 or so, something like that. I'm painting with black. That's going to cover up a little bit. Going to kind of cover those edges, and you can see that it is revealing just a little bit of the tree around the edge. So what I'll do is I'll go back here with no selection. So I'm just selecting the layer artwork again. I'll grab that clone stamp tool again, sample out here. Again, I'm going to reduce the opacity even more. I would rather have to click a couple times to lay down a good amount of kind of covering, if you will, than end up with these just large clumpy areas that are just not blending well with our sky. So let's just what am I thinking? Because I've got the mask selected. I'm going to delete the mask now that I'm thinking about it. Let's get all of our cloning done, and then we'll apply a new mask and mask it in. What was happening was I wasn't seeing the new cloning that I was laying down because the mask that I prematurely painted was covering the edge of what I was trying to cover up. So there we go. In fact, now that I look at it this way, I don't think we need much masking at all. So just, reducing the opacity of your clone stamp tool is going to be super effective in terms of being able to blend stuff together. A lot of times we forget that there are these flow and opacity settings for even tools, like the lowly little clone stamp tool, which is trusty, but I feel like often overlooked. So I'll go through and do major, corrections like that. If I need to do some liquify on her, if I'm looking to enhance the face, there's that super cool new face tool with Photoshop CC. For the filter liquify, I'll see if it detects her face. It can be a little hit or miss. Yeah, there you go, detected it. The face tool right here, one of the newer features in Photoshop, pretty sweet. You can go in, let me just zoom in here. What you can do is grab virtually any feature or portion of her head or her face and just expand her forehead a little bit, maybe make her cheeks a little bit more narrow. But whatever. I mean, if you have an art director you're working with who's like, clean this up or do this, she needs to look this way. You can do so much with this face tool. It's pretty remarkable. So you can go ahead and make those changes. Again, I like to do all of this before I go and start, like dodging and burning. If I had done dodging and burning and, dodged some highlights on her face, and then I go and change the shape of her face, the position of all the highlights moves. So that's part of the reason why these kind of major, shape shifting kind of manipulations and edits, all of this stuff will come first. So moving on from that, let me see here. What should we do next? Let me look here. I've got a list. I'm going to go with blemish removal. So blemish removal, a lot of people are kind of down on this technique that I'm using. Well, not a lot of people, some people in the higher end retouching community, but it's called frequency separation. And here's how you do it. You just want to create a couple new layers from your current existing layers. So that's Command, Shift, Option, or Control, Shift, Alt on the PC and the letter E. It's going to grab all of your current layers, visible layers, and merge them up to a new layer. And you can name your layer whatever. The first layer could be like blur, then a Command or Control J to duplicate this again. And I'm going to name this high for high. This is going to be the high frequency, whereas the blur is going to be sort of the low frequency. I'm going to zoom in on my subject. And when I'm zoomed in on her, I'm on the blur layer. I shut off the high layer. We're going to get back to the high layer in a second. We're going to go filter blur, Gaussian blur. And what we're looking to do with Gaussian blur is blur the image enough that we kind of start to eradicate detail, but not too much. And again, this is something where you'll touch and feel. The more you use it, the more you'll just be able to look at an image and say, oh, that needs 60 pixels of blur, which is way too much in this case. Or maybe like this image only needs 4 or 5 pixels. We can definitely still tell right there her eyes, eyebrows, nose, lips, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'll go ahead and hit OK. We've got that. All right, great. I'll turn on the high layer now. We're going to select the high layer. Zoom out just a touch here. And with the high layer turned on, we would go Image, Apply Image, and we need to apply our high layer to that blurred layer. Here's how we're going to do it. So we're going to select the high layer, the blur layer. We're going to go Blending. Let's try Add. We want to flip this, set this to invert. So the whole goal is, and this is a 16-bit image, so our scale is set to 2 and offset is set to 0. If you're using an 8-bit image, technically you should set this to subtract with a scale of 2 and an offset of 128, and you would shut off invert. Again, you're getting that same, it almost looks like the high pass filter, but it's much more precise. Why the difference between an 8-bit and a 16-bit image? There's a very complex, quite mathematical reason for it that I would bore you to death, but there's some nauseating articles you can read about online, and they explain in great detail why you do these different settings with something like frequency separation in order to sort of split the details of your photo up onto this layer, this high layer, while preserving sort of color and tone on the blur layer beneath. So we're applying the image to the blur layer. We've got invert ticked on. We're using the blend mode of add, scale of 2, offset of 0, opacity at 100%. Go ahead and hit OK. And what you do here is set this layer to the blend mode of a linear light. I believe it's linear light. I usually don't do my frequency separation by hand because I have it packaged up into an action. So sometimes walking back through it. Yeah, the linear light. And you can see if I shut off my whole frequency separation sequence, the image looks no different. But the great thing about this is I can work on some of these blemishes on her face, maybe get rid of the stray hair, things like this, very, very easily by healing them on this high pass layer. And it's just a really, really effective way to quickly go in and clean up an image. So just to give you an example, we'll just go over, get rid of some blemishes on her neck here, and kind of smooth out some of these blemishes on her face. I'm not actually smoothing anything out. That's the key. I'm not looking to blur anything. I'm not really looking to even use frequency separation to smooth tones. You can go in and you can do something like, throw a layer beneath your high and your low layer, and you can call this smoothing or something like that. And you can literally take a paintbrush, right? So we can grab the brush tool. I would set the opacity to like 10%. You want to have it pretty stinking low. Set it to about 10% and grab your eyedropper tool. You want to make sure the eyedropper is sampling maybe like 11 by 11 average. Go back to the brush tool.
Nathaniel, I got a question. How long have you been using Photoshop?
I first opened Photoshop in like 1997. It was Adobe Photoshop 4. I think it was 7 years old. I'm 26 now, so almost 20 years. The majority of my life.
Now I officially hate you.
The first thing I ever did with Photoshop, I remember I opened it and I wanted to know how logos were created. And I had no idea because I was sitting there one day. I'm like, how do you make a logo? You know what I mean? It's just something I kind of always took for granted. Like logos are there. So I just opened Photoshop with the brush tool, set my foreground color like this lime green, and I drew the Gatorade logo, like a hideous soft edge rendition of the Gatorade lightning bolt. And I was like, that can't be how they do it because that looks terrible.
It looks bad, yeah.
But it was, I don't know. It kind of turned into this thing, right? I fell in love with it.
Very cool.
On this kind of tone smoothing layer, I could hold down my Alt or Option key, and you would like sample a highlight, and you would paint around that highlight to sort of help flatten the skin tones a little bit. So I just added just a 10% opacity overlay of that color. And then I would sample like a shadowy area and paint gently over the highlight. And then I would do the same thing down here, where I would sort of paint in the cheeks a little bit. And again, the idea is that you sort of just flatten the overall texture of the face, and you can, or the light hitting the face, and you would go back in with like dodge and burn later and accentuate what you want. It's really not like technically the best way to do it, because you're kind of softening skin texture and just, I don't know. I still sometimes cheat and use it, but it's really not the best way to do it. You really should use like real dodging and burning. We'll cover dodging and burning a little bit. But anyway, here on the high layer, let's go over here. Let's do some, these are kind of more simple blemishes. They're kind of small and contained. So they'll be kind of fast for the sake of showing you here on this live stream before we move on. I like to use the healing brush, not the spot healing brush. Spot healing brush, I don't really have anything against it. I just don't think it's quite as accurate as the straight healing brush tool. And I like to just work on the current layer. In this case, we just want to work on this high layer. If we sample everything, we're going to get some really bizarre results, because remember, this layer is set to this blend mode of linear light. So we'll get like these like just bright white spots. It looks really bad. So we want to make sure we're just sampling the current layer. So hold down Alt or Option, and let's just grab maybe some of this detail. Now, the key with frequency separation is we're really not sampling the color. We're sampling just the texture, because we've sort of extracted the texture here up onto this high layer. So I can paint over this bit here on her chin, get rid of that little bit of blemish, but preserve the real deal color. Now, really what you should be doing is sampling areas of similar texture, and you really don't have to worry about color. So like over here, I'll just sample areas next to her chin that have very, very similar texture, and I'll get just really amazing cover up of all of these blemishes, and it's just super fast. It's, I don't know, in my mind, one of the best ways to go in and quickly remove blemishes that need to be removed is to use this technique. And we got these couple beauty marks here on her neck. We can get rid of them. You're going to see slight discoloration, and of course that's because the color is on the blur layer beneath. So we would go into the blur layer if we had like a massive blemish, like somebody has, you know, I don't know, somebody gets a shot or something in the arm, and they're like, yeah, I kind of like that one retouched out. Obviously, you get rid of all the detail of like a gunshot wound or something. You're probably still going to have like red or blood or something there. To get rid of that color cast that's going to be there, you would go down to the blur layer and probably work with the clone stamp tool. So you're just copying color from one spot to the next.
Nathaniel, are you working with a lot of gunshot victims?
Thankfully, I've never had to do that. It was just the first thing that popped into my mind.
Now, when you said shot, I'm thinking hospital, needle. Nope. Well, you went to gunshot.
I'm trying to think what kind of major like skin blemish there would be. And, you know, I don't know. I would just figure if that was somehow in a photo, somebody would probably want to get rid of that. So as you can see, I mean, you can just go.
That's probably not their biggest concern at that point, but.
Point well taken. All right, so you just go over, you know, the skin, and you can be as perfecting and exacting as you like or not. Now, for the sake of moving on in this tutorial, I'm not going to spend 30 minutes doing all the frequency separation. I would rather get on to other things. So let's talk about retouching some of the facial details, like eyes, lips, things like that. Here's generally how I like to do them and clean things up a little bit. It's kind of the idea of lots of subtle things make one relatively big difference. I don't like to do any one retouch that's just like, well, blam, whoa, that changed everything so much. I would rather sort of have to, you know, go back and forth and shut my layer off. And by the way, a cool hotkey for shutting your layer off, turning it on, is just the Command or Control key and the comma. So you can quickly just preview your layer by just bam, 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 tapping that key. Pretty cool. All right, so let's zoom in here on her face. And again, we have a lot of sort of acne. And my rule with retouching skin, generally, if it's not going to be there in 2 or 3 weeks, I get rid of it just by default. Beyond that, it's client's discretion. So sometimes, I mean, I worked with a beauty pageant here in PA, and she in Pennsylvania, and she had a mole like down here on her chin. She's very clear. She's like, that's the feature, a facial feature. I love that. Please don't, you know, get rid of that. So, you know, that kind of stuff. I've worked with brides though, who it's just like, look, can you just get rid of this? This is a photo I want to hang it on my bedroom wall, and I'm just self-conscious about this. No problem. You know what? We got Photoshop. I can just knock it out for you. I have absolutely no problem doing that. After all, you're paying me for the photos, and I'll do what you want.
Now,
All right.
StarCrunch's got a question. Do you have a go-to move
Yes.
for retouching editing, something you like to do to most photos?
Sharpening. I mean, sharpening hits every image that comes in, and that goes for a landscape photo, a beauty photo, a wedding portrait, just about anything. Cropping is another thing I do a reasonable amount of, and it's not like, oh, I screwed this shot up, I'm totally recropping it. Sometimes just cropping away like a very thin sliver at the top or on one of the sides of the photos just totally changes the composition. There's actually some really, really cool articles online, and I wish I had some like at my fingertips. There's some really cool write-ups. Cinematographers who obsess over shot composition. Their websites you can go and check out, the Reddit subreddits that you can check out where people break down like shots of famous TV shows, Breaking Bad, like the new Stranger Things show, Mr. Robot, I think was one that I just saw a guy do a write-up of, and just really go through and show you how they're not just using stuff like the golden third, the rule of thirds, or whatever the technical name is, but they're using, the Greek spiral thing or Roman spiral, whatever it is, and just all of these different, here's how they measured these angles on a diagonal, and just a really technical, very interesting breakdown of great composition. And I mean, you really see how having an element, and this could be where your subject's eye falls. It could be where the bride's mother, who is shedding a tear behind her, falls in the background. Cropping an image just a little bit. It's not like a big sexy feature of Photoshop. It's not some kind of big like, we're gonna do this and put an eye in her forehead or something. But one little adjustment to a crop can make, it can take your image from an okay image to a wow image. I need that printed right now. That's the best image you got that day. So
Absolutely.
Cropping and sharpening, I think, again, neither of them are necessarily like the big, flashy feature or anything, but I think they're super essential and something I do to virtually every image.
And someone's asking, where do you live in Pennsylvania?
I live right outside of Philadelphia. So I'm probably the best, if you're familiar with Pennsylvania, if you know a town called King of Prussia. I'm close to a town called King of Prussia, second biggest mall in America, I think, still in that town. So yeah, I'm right outside of Philly, but I'm down in Philly often. Some studio space, office, well, actually a few studio spaces down in the city, and some newer office space as well. But I live outside the city. So I guess let's, facial features, right? We good? You can keep hitting me with questions as they come in. I'm not really following.
Nope, that's it. You're all caught up.
Okay, yeah, and any questions, guys, seriously, I'm not the kind of person who's like, that's a dumb question. Even if it is a dumb questions are some of the best questions, because they're the questions that we're all afraid to ask.
Right.
All right, so here we go. What I like to do is add 2 curves adjustment layers. So just bam, bam, curves adjustment layers. And I select each of the layer masks and just hit this invert button here. It's just going to fill the layer mask with black. The hotkey is Command or Control I if you're interested in hotkeys. And what I like to do is set the lower of these adjustment layers to the blend mode color burn, and the higher of these adjustment layers to color dodge. So color dodge is like an extreme brightness. You're just going to really pop that light in there, whereas color burn is just a very deep, like inky, really destroying the shadows kind of black. In fact, if I hold down shift and just click the mask to disable it, you can see, it's just a very destructive blend mode. So we really need to be careful corralling this with our layer mask. I'm going to zoom in here on her eyes. The whole breakdown, and I'll just create a new layer here, and hopefully you guys can see this over Twitch. I'll try to choose a nice vibrant color here so as to make this as visible as possible. Generally what I'm looking for when I'm retouching eyes is, number one, I'm looking for subtlety. Subtlety is so key. There's so many times you see, and I've got, I wouldn't call them dear friends, but reasonable friends who I know of, who have photo studios. And one of the biggest things that I'll either talk to them about when they ask me, or sometimes when they don't ask me, is the eyes of their subjects. You'll very often see people go overboard with the eyes of the subjects, and
Yes.
it's like space crystally. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like to year 2000 through 2010, the space crystal eye will be what the bleached muslin background was to your cheap local portrait.
Yeah, the best advice I can give to someone when they're retouching eyes is the minute you think you've done enough, immediately zoom all the way out and see a before and after, because more than likely zoomed in, it looks like, oh, it's still not bright enough, it's still not sharp enough, until you zoom out, and now you've got a ghost on your hands. So do a little, zoom out, zoom in, do a little more, zoom out, zoom in.
Right. And Terry, it goes to the point of why I like to start hitting facial features this early on in the process, because if I really go crazy with the eyes right now, when I zoom back out, they're going to look totally out of place. But the key is, like you said, I mean, zoom out, take a look, and don't be afraid to be self-critical. Like being able to self-edit. I took one photography class in my life when I was, I don't know, a few years old. The only time I've really shot with film, and I'm not that ashamed to admit it, but maybe kind of. But the most valuable thing I took out of this class was we had like this exercise where we had to go and shoot a couple rolls of film or something and submit our 3 best images. I couldn't get mine whittled down beyond like 17. So I was like, can I like submit 17 instead of 3? Which is a ridiculous thing to ask, of course. And what the teacher said, the most valuable thing I took away from that class, and maybe one of the most valuable pieces of photographic advice I've ever had, and it transmits or translates to the retouching world as well. He said, if you can't edit yourself, you will be a failure. Kind of harsh to tell a 15-year-old that, but you know what? It was really good. And in hindsight, it was really good. And so much of what you're doing, whether you're deciding whether or not to keep that retouch edit, or keep that whole shot, or display that shot. I mean, Terry, you've shot everything from models to you've shot some weddings, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately.
But sometimes, when a client looks at your body of work that you present to them, you're only as good as your weakest image.
Right.
So sometimes you can have, you can look like Vogue Italia, with 90% of your shots, and you can have like 10 clunkers in there, and they're like, oh man, look at how
that's why I always tell people when they're doing their portfolio, pick a number, whatever that number is, 10, 20, 15, 18, whatever it is, and then you stick to that number. In other words, if you want to put something new in your portfolio, it has to be strong enough to knock something else out.
Right.
You don't add, you replace once you hit that number, whatever that number is that you've decided. So like, I think on my galleries on my website, it might be 20 or 24. I can't remember what it is, or 25, but whatever it is. If I want to add a new one to the gallery, that means something not as good has to come out.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good way to think about it. Anyway, let's get to the eyes for those of you waiting. So the way I like to look at eyes is, I'm going to use yellow here to mark the areas that are going to be darkened. So I like to, generally speaking, add a little darkness here along the top portion of the eye where makeup will go. And I'll usually instruct my makeup artists, depending on how easy or difficult they are to work with and depending on what the client is calling for. I almost always advise them go a little lighter on the makeup rather than heavy. It's easier to pump makeup up in Photoshop than to tone it back. Much easier. So I'll darken there. I'll also add a little bit more darkness here to the top of the eye above the catch lights that I'll have if I have catch lights in the top of the eye. It's just, I'm looking to add depth to the colored part of the eye. So then I'll also darken up the very pupil. And then I'll also darken just this little ring around the eye here, just this little bit out here. And then I'll also add a little bit of darkness on the corners of the actual eyeball. Now, I do have to counsel you here with the bits of color you add to the outside parts of the eye. If you add too much, you will literally make it look like the eyeballs are popping out of your model or your subject's head. Really, really not a very flattering look. So
yeah, and the other thing I remind people is that nobody's eyes are white. Nobody's eyes are 100% white. So if you go in with a white brush and make them white, we'll know.
Right. And nobody's eyes are flat. So when you take that white brush and go in and they start to look flat, it's a really it's a dead giveaway that something funky's happening. So that's what I'm looking to do with my shadows. With highlights, it's fairly simple. I look to just pop these catch lights in the top of the eye, and in fact, sometimes I even duplicate the catch light over if I want to strengthen it. And then I look to add brightness down here in the bottom part of the colored portion of the eye. Again, pretty important because when we've added the shadow around the edge of the iris, by adding color down here to the bottom part of the colored portion of the eye, you're going to create this illusion of depth, which tends to make people's eyes look a little bit more like, drawing me in, bringing me in. I don't know what it is about your eyes. And then you can also, if need be, add a little bit of brightness to the whites of the eyes right out here. Again, be careful with that, though, because if you make eyes look too spherical, they are spheres. If you make them look too spherical where they appear on your face, they tend to look like they're jutting out of the subject's head. Not a very good look. All right, so we're going to begin with the color burn layer. Again, this is the darkening layer. I like to use my brush tool, right-click, hardness of a 0 almost always works. I need to make sure my foreground color is set to white with a little arrow to flip it. You can see I'm now painting with very dark stuff. I'm going to set the opacity of my brush to about 10, so 9% is fine. And I'll go through and I'll just gently paint around this part of her eye. And I'm not being very perfecting at all. I'm just going to draw across the front part of the eyelid, get around the outside part of the eye, darken up the very inky black where I'm looking into her soul. And I don't think for this image I'm going to darken the edges of her eyeball at all. She had her eyes kind of naturally stuck out a reasonable amount, so that's good. Up here on color dodge now, what I'll do is I will just click a couple times to just make the catch lights pop. I don't think I'm going to duplicate it over. I kind of actually like the way it looks. And then what I'll do is just come down here to the bottom part of the eye, and I'm just going to paint in there a few times until I can kind of see a difference, right? And even when you see a difference, if you think you need more, which I don't really think I do need more. Yeah, no, that actually looks good. Never mind. I don't think I need more. So what I'll do is I'll zoom out, and I actually do. You see how this eyelid almost looks like it's drooping because the catch light is so much smaller up there. So I do think for the sake of the image looking right, I'm going to duplicate that over. Here's how I would do that. Beneath my my eye retouch or my eye color and light boosting layers, create a new layer, and I'll just name this catch light copy. All right, zoom back in here. This is actually pretty simple. You just grab the clone stamp tool, right click. You need this to be relatively small. By relatively small, I mean about 10, 8, 9, 10 pixels. That's fine. But undo that. We want to make sure we're sampling current and below. That's great. I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key. Just click right in the middle of that catch light. Make my brush a tiny bit larger. And again, my opacity is set to 100%. And all you would have to do is just simply click once right where you want that catch light to drop, and you're going to get like an exact duplicate of the catch light. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm using kind of the positioning of the small mini catch light I have. But you're going to see here when I zoom out just how much increasing that catch light has opened her eye up. Now, if it's too bright, you can always reduce your opacity just a touch, blend it right in there. You know, I don't know, 60%, 70%, it looks pretty good. So that's something, again, that you want to be careful of. Just keep an eye out for. You know, balanced faces tend to look a little bit better. And just to keep her eyelid looking like it was drooping down, we just wanted to copy that catch light over. So at this point, we have two adjustment layers for our eyes. They're both at 100%. If we shut all of these off, there's before and there's after. What you need to do now is this is the process of editing your retouch. So use that opacity slider and just scale back until things blend to the point where it's kind of difficult to tell you did anything. Again, all of what we're doing here in our retouch is kind of, it's not reduplicating upon itself, but it's all cumulative, where you create 50 layers and it makes one, 50 subtle changes make one big change. So you can see there's before and there's after. But if I shut off like just the highlights layer, I mean, you can tell there's some difference there. If I shut off just the shadows layer, almost hard to tell there's a difference there. And of course, if I shut off the catch light layer, you're going to notice that. So yeah, I mean, that's how I like to retouch eyes. I find it's very easy. It's pretty quick. And most importantly, it just gives me the control I need to go in and like you mentioned before, Terry, just get more of like a realistic looking eye by zooming out. What does it look like in context with the rest of the image?
Right.
Kind of important stuff.
Because it's funny when you're zoomed in, for whatever reason, eyes never look bright enough. When you zoom out, it's like, oh my God, deer in the headlights.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's talk a little bit about dodging and burning as we wind down under the 20-minute mark left. I want to make sure I get in a couple.
Well, and feel free to go over if you need be. Mine is not critical.
Okay.
Yep. So you don't have to. We don't have to stick to the exact, top of the hour. You can go as long as you need to.
Okay. All right. So if I have that little bit of extra time,
you do.
Let me just show you one of my favorite little tricks for helping clean away flyaway hairs. And this is a particularly useful trick, and it works well if you're over a solid color background or a mixed background. Let's say you photograph a guy or a girl in a park. A lot of times your background is going to be out of focus, greenery, trees. You get kind of that bokeh with the dappled light coming through it. This method will work over a complex, multicolored, multi-brightness background like that, or something solid like this sky. Of course, it works over this gray sky. It's also going to work over like a studio background, white, gray, whatever. I like to create a new layer here, and I'll just call this hair flyaways. And the way I like to get rid of these is, again, going back to my trusty healing brush tool, but I like to set the mode to replace. Most of the time I'm working with this in normal. In fact, I was working with it in replace, I believe, on my high pass, it's not high pass technically, the high frequency layer. But you can be working with it set to normal is probably the best way to do that, but replace works as well. More important to work with replace when you're doing the hair flyaway cleanup. Reason being, you're not going to get as much of that. The current pixels are going to be sort of blended with the background. It's going to work a little bit more like a really, really good clone stamp tool that helps cover things and mesh a background really well. Of course, I guess you could use the clone stamp tool as well. I just don't think it's quite as effective as the good old healing brush. So I make my brush pretty small, just big enough to cover up the hair. But then alter option to sample part of your background. Make sure you're sampling current and below. I'm up on my own layer, by the way. I like to do a lot of healing, a lot of this kind of correction up on its own layer. Way more non-destructive. You can reduce the opacity. You can, hide any of those effects. You can get rid of them at any time. If a client says, "Hey, I like my flyaway hairs," you can say, "Hey, no problem. I can just show off a layer, export the JPEG again, and good to go." All right. So then you would just go in and paint over whatever little bits of hair are sticking out. So it's manual labor. It can be tedious and tiresome at times. But boy, I'll tell you what. And Tara, you probably know this from shooting women in the studio. When you get rid of and you do a good job cleaning up flyaway hair, it is remarkable the difference it makes in a final finished image.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of essential to the whole process. And it's,
all right.
I mean, if there is...
as we speak, I'm trying your technique. I've not tried this before, so I'm on my own image giving it a shot. And you may have given me my new flyaway hair technique.
There you go.
I kind of like it.
But and this probably is the #1 most requested thing to be done to a portrait by a client. That's whether I'm photographing somebody for their LinkedIn profile, business headshot, or like a straight up fashion shoot, like, out in the woods, going full hipster on it. It's probably the most requested thing. Hey, can you control these flyaways? And the answer, thankfully, is usually absolutely. We can control the flyaways.
I like it.
I can kill off a couple more of these flyaways. And obviously you can go around, you can get rid of as many or as few of them as you like. Typically I like to leave some kind of texture on the edge of the hair, so I probably wouldn't get rid of every single flyaway. But again, it's a personal preference of your client. If you have a paying client who wants a certain something, at least you know how to deliver it. Maybe for your own portfolio, you want to adjust the image a little bit more to your liking. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Again, as long as you kind of have permission from the client and depending on how your usage rights are set up for your shoot. So hair flyaways, that's the way I'll do that. There are a lot of different techniques for actually for retouching hair. I'll just show you one of the ways I like to do this. There are some really advanced techniques we can get into, but again, we have neither the time nor just not the time right now. So here's what I like to do. We'll just say hair retouch. For retouching hair, really one of the best ways to go in, like if you want to clean up hair and just get like all of these waves of hair perfectly wavy the same way, you want to create another frequency separation action, where you basically merge all this stuff together, blur layer, high frequency layer, and you would work on that high frequency layer with the clone stamp tool, with the healing brush tool, and I mean, it takes a bit of time to do that. So that's how you would do that. But just for like some quick hair retouch changes, again, probably my favorite technique would be, again, jumping into that healing brush. And this is going to all depend on where you're working in the hair, but normal and replace are great. You can also play around with multiply and screen depending on where you are. So I can go ahead with like my screen mode here, the current and below, and I can like sample here. I can go ahead and try to heal just some of these darker spots in her hair. Just go through and kind of, if there's areas that are too shadowy, that are just not working, you want to bring up the brightness, kind of mesh some of the texture of your hair together. You got to be really careful with hair. Hair is a perfect example of probably when you want to turn hardness almost up to 100%. There are no soft edges in hair.
So someone's saying you're basically adding hair to the pic then.
Right, exactly. But and this is where it's important to kind of differentiate. You can take the clone stamp tool, you can take any of these other tools and add hair, right? Like we could take the clone stamp tool over here and fill in this area that's thin, which is a great thing to do. You're going to get amazing results, right? I'll probably sample from up here and come in here and just go ahead and fill this area with hair as best I can as well. But particularly this technique, what it's going to do is, and again, this is the key of the hard-edged brush, is you're going to maintain detail in the hair. I have some examples, tragically, of some old beauty retouching that I did where I did not use this principle of a hard-edged brush. I use a very small but a soft-edged brush, and it tends to give your hair this very like bizarre glow. It's not like adding a Gaussian blur where the whole head is glowing. It's just this, it looks like almost like a little surface blur has been rubbed over the entirety of the hair. All of the detail, it's there, but it's very softened. So a hard edge brush is going to help you maintain the crispness of the individual strands of hair, which, the 10,000 individual strands of hair make up, a tuft of hair on your head or something. So, having this hard edged brush makes a huge difference when it comes to working with hair. I'm going to go to replace mode here and just fill in this bit of hair over here a little bit more effectively. And you can see, well, see now over here, I need to soften the edge of my brush just a little bit. So take it down to like, whoop, hello, 60, 70%, something like so. And then I would sample right up here. Just go in and, maybe I don't want to use replace. Maybe I want to use normal. Let's see what this looks like. Normal is probably going to blend it much better. There we go. Yeah. And I'm just looking, when I do this, looking for just reduplicating patterns. If, I have a piece of hair horizontally that looks like it's appearing or stacking multiple times, you just want to go in and knock that stuff out. It takes a split second and it just looks so much better. You're not going to have somebody commenting saying like, oh, I can see where you kind of went in and retouched there, you clean things up or whatever. So it'll save you kind of that headache or feeling confrontational on Facebook or wherever you prefer to post your photos. So you can see just like this horizontal piece obviously is a copy of that. And I've got these other multiple horizontal pieces there. So I'll just go and like knock out a couple of them and just really help to, kind of clean up and shore up the cleanliness of the hair, if you will, the cleanliness of my heel.
Now, can you explain why replace? Like, what's replace going to do that normal doesn't?
No, okay, so normal, and I'm using normal right now for these bigger heels. Normal does a lot more of like and I don't know all the technical algorithmic.
That's okay. Just put it in plain English.
Generally, your normal blend mode on the healing brush is going to do more healing. More healing means more blending and blurring of colors.
Got it.
When you want to preserve detail, when you want a more precise heel, you want to go with something like the replace mode, which is going to do more of a 1-to-1 pixel replacement, but still in like the healing brush's own peculiar way.
So that's very similar to when I explain people the difference between the patch tools, normal versus content aware. Normal does more blending. Exactly. Content aware is more exact, more of a replacement.
Right, a little bit more context heavy,
right.
Something like content aware. And this is, think of maybe an easy way to conceptualize it. Normal mode is like having a very soft brush that's going to just feather everything. Replace is going to be more like having a harder brush that's going to be a little bit more literal to where you're painting.
Yeah, okay, same thing.
So, hair retouch, you can go in, it's just a few minor changes. And, voila, you go in and retouch the hair. And clean that up. Again, the best way to really retouch hair is going to be doing more of that frequency separation type stuff that we did, but we're not going to get into that in this tutorial. We could spend 2 hours just talking about that. I don't want to bore you with that. Let's move on to dodging and burning. And it looks a little weird here because I still have so many blemishes and things I normally would have cleaned up on the skin. But let's ignore that for the moment. Here's how I like to do my dodging and burning. There's a ton of different ways to do dodging and burning. This is the way that I think is best. It's the way that I'm most comfortable with, and it gives me the most flexibility. Again, create 2 curves adjustment layers. And by the way, you can use curves adjustment layers, you can use levels adjustment layers. Adjustment layers are just a nice way to carry a blend mode. So like I could set this to the blend mode of screen, and you can see I brighten my whole image, and I can now control where brightness is going to go. I just want to select the mask here, and again, hit that little invert button. Great. Select the adjustment layer down here. This is going to be my darkening agent, so I'm going to set this to multiply, and it darkens the image. Great. Set it to the blend mode of multiply set. Select the mask, hit the invert button, and voila, we invert. I generally, when I'm dodging and burning, I like to start with my shadows. So I would begin with my multiply layer, work with that first, and then I'll go to highlights later. Whatever's personal preference, do what you like most. Shadows tends to work best for me. The brush tool, opacity, you want your opacity to be low. Flow would be at 100%. Difference between flow and opacity. Opacity is only going to let me lay down a 10% coating, if you will, of darkness, whereas flow is like holding a can of spray paint. It begins light, but the longer you hold it, it just keeps accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. So I don't want that kind of control. I want a very just stroke by stroke by stroke control over my dodging and burning. So that's why I'm controlling the opacity here and not the flow. All right, so multiply. Let's, I don't want to zoom in yet. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to set my hardness to 0. I'm going to increase the size, maybe to like, a couple hundred, 200, 300. No, more than that. I'm sorry, maybe 400 or 500. There we go, something like that. Painting with white. And the first thing I'm going to do is just like my general atmospherical, landscape-oriented dodging and burning. So that would be stuff like, remember, when we began with this photo, and if I hold down my Alt or Option key, I can just click the eyeball and jump back to the original image, right? So there's what we began with. Now this does not include the camera raw changes we made, but remember we did that flattening, that reduction of contrast. Dodging burn is going to help us add some of that back, and we'll go and add more back, if I remember, with some masked curves layers as well. So hold down the Alt or Option key, click the eyeball again to turn all those layers back on. And by the way, you can just name this burn. This helps, again, as you stack up, 20, 30 layers, you need to come back and start making edits. All right, so burn, and I would just paint in here, just a couple strokes through there. Go ahead and just get that. Great. Maybe just this front side of this building. When you're working with very straight edge buildings, it might be prudent of you to increase your hardness a little bit, maybe bring it up to 80% or so, just so you don't have these big billowing pillow-like. Oh, hello. That was a little bit too much. I need to reduce my opacity even more. I'm going to hit 0.3. That's going to set my opacity to 3%. And I'm going to really go very light on the dodging here on the side of this building. I mean, just very, very subtle stuff. It makes a difference. It does make a difference.
Definitely makes a difference.
Over there. Great. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time dodging and burning the buildings, but you can see, by the way, this building right here is the Comcast Tower in Philadelphia. Right now they're building another building right next to it, like right here. And it's going to be the tallest building on the East Coast outside of New York City. But
you can save them a lot of time. Just duplicate the layer.
Exactly. But there's going to be a restaurant on the top of it, and I'm trying to get access to the rooftop. I want to be the first photographer to do a rooftop shoot above every other building in Philadelphia.
Sweet.
Cool. It's not going to be done until like next summer or something, though, so I got some time to play with. All right, so if we shut off the burn layer, there's before, there's after. So you can see it's atmospheric stuff. Once we do that, I'll zoom in on her a little bit. Kind of as I retouch areas, I like to zoom in and take a look at them. So I'll begin here with her body, and as you maybe notice, I'm going from kind of like the bigger, softer areas that need to be retouched or dodged and burned, to the kind of slightly smaller areas like the body of her dress, and then I'll hit the details like her arms, face, hair, stuff like that. Let's go back to the brush tool.
All right, so there's a question about the layers. So many layers. So you use the many layers so you can do different things to the picture and not overdo it to ruin a pic. That's yes and no. Thinking Nathaniel can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Nathaniel's case, each layer is serving a purpose for a different part of the photo that was being retouched, or a different technique on the photo. So yes, we use layers all the time to protect things, to be able to go back, to be able to isolate things, to be able to apply effects to specific areas, and have the ability to turn those on and off and move about them, the whole image as we can. But it's not necessarily so we don't ruin a pic. It's just that's kind of a byproduct of layers.
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less, the more you can compartmentalize your retouching, the more control you have over your image. And we're not limited to 16 layers, and we're not shooting with film, so why not use every bit of capability that you have? You know what I mean? If you can, I mean, don't use 400 layers just because, hey, I can throw 400 layers into a photo. But, if retouching and having a final retouched image with 30 layers provides a better result that you have much more control over than an image with 5 layers, I would take the image with 30 layers all day long. It only takes 5 seconds to name a layer. And you can always come back to the image, months or years later and say, you know what, I actually want to retouch this. That frequency separation, when I softened her skin, I did that totally wrong. Or I really don't like the way that looks. I want to update that image with this new, better technique that I have. Or maybe just straight up, I'm better at retouching. I'm better at identifying areas of skin that need to be adjusted. I'm better at sampling texture on my skin. You can always come back and either rerun your frequency separation adjustments, or you can tweak and adjust what you already have there, but you don't even have that option if you don't have things segmented out into layers. So that's the whole purpose of
and I'm probably the opposite, as people have seen me on my previous broadcasts. I probably use fewer layers than any other person retouching, because I only, not because I'm against layers. Obviously, layers are serving an awesome purpose, but I just don't have as many opportunities to go back and keep tweaking. So once I do a retouch on an image, it's rare that I have to go back and make a change, or even have the opportunity to go back and make a change, because of the time crunch. But definitely when it's something that like what you're doing, compartmentalizing, segmenting different parts of the retouch, layers come in extremely handy for that. And no, this is not Atlanta. This is Philadelphia, right?
Yes, this is Philly.
Okay.
Yep.
So I know
Atlanta's a cool city.
Right. I know the tower. Someone says they recognize a tower from Atlanta. It does look very similar to a tower in Atlanta, but it's not Atlanta.
So what I'm doing here with the dodge and burn is I kind of zoom in a little bit and pare my brush size down. I'm focusing on the areas that kind of naturally have shadow. Again, I'm not like, popping the muscles in her arm to make her look like a fitness model or anything like that. And you can always, again, because the burning is on a separate layer, you can reduce the opacity and really dial that effect in. But I am just looking, like here, the crease in her arm where her elbow is kind of, or her arm is bending back across her bicep. I'll just increase that shadow a little bit. Just, it's popping the contrast. It's giving a little bit of additional depth. I like to run along the shadows that are currently existing. And again, don't be afraid to reduce the opacity of your tool. One of the best things you can do is just reduce that opacity, paint a couple strokes rather than, too much. It's a classic case of, better to be, build up to something than build too much and have to cut it down. It's like the opposite of the barber, right? The barber cuts too short and you can't add on. It's easier for you to add too little and keep piling it up. All right, so once I've done, and by the way, I'll just give you a quick before and after. I've kind of done the dress in her arms here to shut the burning off, turn it back on. So just increasing shadows underneath here. Whoops. We're increasing kind of the shadow here along what would be the inside of her pelvis, and then over here underneath her arm, just deepening those shadows a little bit. So once we get up here to the face, I like to zoom in and really kind of focus in on some of the details of both her facial features and also the hair as well. So like down under here, we've got some shadow in the hair. So I'll try to hit that and even make the brush very small and just add to the shadows that remain in the hair. So at this point, remember, theoretically, we would have gone over the hair and gotten rid of any little shadows like we did for just these couple example shadows up here. Any kind of shadows we wanted to get rid of, at this point, we probably would have gotten rid of them. So we can just go through any of these shadowy areas and just boost the shadows, again, as they need to be boosted. Like that shadow right there does not need to be boosted, it's add. So I'm not going through just indiscriminately and boosting every shadow. I'm looking and just being careful, checking out what it looks like, and adding what needs to be added. And again, this is all just, the more you retouch, the more you'll be able to look at it and say, I hate that, or I love that. But hey, if you know how to do it, at least you've got the option. One of the things I like to do is when you have two sort of textures meeting each other, like her hair coming into, or her hand coming into her hair, I like to make sure that shadow is brought out a little bit more. The same would be the case for kind of her hair all the way around her head, where her hair meets her forehead, areas like that. It's just nice to have a little bit of burning. It just helps kind of that transition a little bit more naturally. One of the other things I like to do with the burn is sometimes darken the center of the mouth. We don't want that like coin slot mouth, but just adding a little bit of darkness can be nice. Also darkening up the bottom of the nostrils, enhancing the shadow there below the nose, enhancing the eyebrows, a couple passes over the eyebrows. We didn't do like an official eyebrow retouch. There are ways to trim and adjust the eyebrows as well. We didn't go over that though. But darkening the eyebrows up can help them appear thicker, fuller, more healthy, things like that. It's always just good, right? And then something that I find kind of interesting when I'm burning, particularly an image like this where I've got directional light. So like right now, all of the light is coming from this side of the image, the right side of the image, if you will, and smacking into her face from this side. And I don't have any lights over here. It's just with one light, one single light at like 6 in the morning or something. So we have fairly even light to begin with, but we have the light coming in from the right side of the image. So naturally more of the shadowing is going to be over here on what would be the camera left side of her face. I like to enhance those shadows with burning as well. It just tends to help the light look a little bit more directional. So I'll increase that shadow there on that side of her nose, but not on this side of her nose. And then I'll just come into here and just I mean, subtle stuff, you know, maybe 1, maybe 2 passes, but I think just 1 is going to work for me there. I'm going to zoom back in on her face and increase the shadow here beneath her lip. And you can kind of go over anywhere really that you look at and say, hey, we need more. We want her chin to look like it's sticking out from her neck a little bit further. All right, increase the shadow a little bit there beneath her chin, where it's going to run back into her neck. You just kind of naturally make it look like it's jutting out a little bit more. You know, use your discretion. Right? You've got eyes, you can see what you're working on. So there we go. So we've got our burning done. So we can just shut that off, turn it back on. And you can see like we've done a legitimate amount of change. So the same thing for screen. I would just turn screen on. I can work here on the trees first. Actually, I'm not totally digging that, but I'm going to leave it just for the heck of it. And then over here on buildings, I don't know that I'm going to make the highlights pop at all on the buildings. Just don't think it's quite going to work. I mean, this side of the building, for instance, is already essentially the same color as the sky, so I'm not going to do much in the way of that. Over here for the dress, what I can do is come down here with some highlight. Now, my brush is too strong, so that highlight is way too strong, both of those. So with my opacity, I'll probably go like 0.6 to set it to 6%. There we go, cool. With wrinkles, actually, kind of a fun little trick. Photoshop will let me zoom in, there we go, so you get a wrinkle because the clothing are a little wrinkly, but a wrinkle is going to catch light by, you know, and show on camera by being brighter on one side and darker on the other. So like if the client is the fashion designer for this dress and they say, hey, look, can you kind of like get rid of some of these wrinkles? It's one of the worst, most difficult things because you look at it and you say, I mean, there's a pattern. It's not like I can just clone stamp and get rid of these wrinkles like that. Usually what I tell my clients is we can't get rid of wrinkles without making a garment look fake. Not unless you're spending just an absorbent amount of time reconstructing entire parts of the clothing. And if you do a commercial fashion shoot where you're turning over 250 images to a magazine, you're not gonna have time for that. So what I like to tell clients is, number one, let's get it as right as possible at the time of the shoot. But if you still have some wrinkles, you can use dodging and burning. Like here, I'm going to use my dodging, and I'm just going to run along the dark side of that wrinkle and help just kind of alleviate it. The texture is still a little wavy, but it's much more difficult to pick up and notice a wrinkle when you kind of help neutralize the shadow beneath the wrinkle. And here, I'll just shut my screen layers off so you can see there the wrinkles are after screen. There they are before the screening. So it's subtle, but again, like everything else we've been talking about, subtlety is key. All right, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to work on her arm. We do have a natural highlight that kind of runs down her arm here, what comes out from the shoulder, and also kind of runs down her arm this way. And I think I need to, I'm not going to increase my opacity. I'm going to increase my brush size, make it a little softer, and run down her forearm that way, catch the highlight right there on her elbow. Great. As you're looking at it, if it looks a little bit too powerful, we'll come back and touch things up with the mask a little bit more, or just straight up reduce opacity of the entire layer. Let's get right here. Go ahead and increase the brightness there, help catch light. Inside of her arm, on the back side of her forearm here. Whoop, hello. Let's try that again. There we go. Back side of her forearm. And then the neck. Again, we're not going to add, obviously, a lot of dodging to areas that are naturally dark because that just won't look right. I'm going to set my brush back to the opacity of 10 by hitting the number 1. And I'm going to go through the hair here, and here's where I want to use a much smaller brush. And I just really want to accentuate the highlights in the hair. Even I like to try to hit these little kind of, they're not strands, they're more like, very thick clumps of hair that end up hanging down. If you can accentuate the highlights, you help make the hair look a little bit more wavy, a little bit more curly. You just really bring out the texture and the depth of contrast in the hair. Again, it's a good idea, especially as you get toward the bigger highlights, reduce the hardness of your brush just a little bit and go through and brighten up some of these highlights. Touch here, go through, go across. This is a very obvious highlight here. We don't want to do too much there. You can, again, you start to make it look like she has a curler on or something if you increase that highlight too much. There we go, come right through there, voila. Increase these highlights here. We're kind of playing fast and loose with this. I'll right click, go back to a very soft brush. I'm going to create the highlight down the side of her hand there. And then what we have left to do is touch up her face. So the way I like to touch up highlights on the face is begin with like a medium-sized brush. So we've got this big highlight here in the middle of her forehead. Just click once, make the brush a little bit larger, and click again. So it just kind of sets the point of the highlight, and then the second click sort of feathers the highlight to meet with the rest of the skin around that. The cheeks can be a good place to throw a highlight. Make the brush very small so you can catch the highlight on the nose. Whoop, that's a little bit too small on my brush. Let's try that again. There we go. We can get above the mouth like so. You can really add a nice highlight to the lips. Now that all depends on how glossy you want the lips to look. Her lips are very matte in this shot, so I'm not going to do a lot of detail. Hey, let's make the lips really glossy in this case. And I also don't want her skin to look super oily and super greasy. So that's where you want to be careful with your dodging as well. So if I shut dodging off, there it is. So I can just do a quick before and after. And you can see the dodging and burning process. It does a lot. It does a lot to change your image. And there's a couple things you can do here. So sometimes I've gotten away from this technique a little bit, but it can be a fun thing to try. I like to select both of my adjustment layers. Select top, hold down shift, select the bottom layer. Command or Control J to duplicate it. It's obviously going to double up your effect, which is way too much. You can select the layer mask, and you can go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and blur it by, 15 or 20 pixels. This is all going to depend on the size of your photo. Select the second mask there, filter, and we just hit it with that same Gaussian blur. So we've just sort of softened all of that work that we just did to further blend it in. But obviously there's way too much. So I'm going to select both of these top two duplicated layers and reduce them to an opacity of like between 30 and 40. I'm going to select my bottom two layers and I'll reduce them kind of until it looks good. So let's take this down. Yeah, somewhere between 60 and 70 probably looks good for this image. So I can shut all four of these layers off. That's before my dodging and burning. That's after my dodging and burning and having things kind of faded together. So that's pretty much, the bulk of the retouching. I think before I go, Terry, I would really like to share a sharpening technique, especially since sharpening earlier.
Go right ahead.
There are plenty of contrast and tonal adjustments you can make, levels adjustment layer, curves adjustment layer, where you need contrast, and use your masks liberally. Masks are your friend. They're so powerful. They're so amazing. Let's talk about sharpening, though. So, again, we're going to do that high frequency, or I keep calling it high frequency. It's just frequency separation. You're separating the high frequencies from the low frequencies in your image. Command, Shift, Option, or Control, Shift, Alt, and the letter E to merge all of your layers to a new layer. And we can name this layer low, blur, whatever. You can name it any number of things. Just something that you know. I'm naming this low because I already named this one blur, and I want to differentiate between this layer and the other layer when I go and apply this image. And this is going to be my sharpen layer. So I'm going to shut the sharpen layer off. I'm going to go to the low layer, and I think this is a fairly common technique.
So just so people that are just getting here are catching this part of the technique. So you basically merged all your layers to a new layer.
Yep.
And you duplicated that layer.
Yes.
Okay.
Control J.
Yep. All right, keep going.
And we shut off the top layer, as you can see, and we're working on the low layer. So we're looking to blur details. So here, in fact, I'll just zoom in on her face because this is kind of important for the sharpening. And I'll address a somewhat common question with this in just a second. But we'll go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're on the low layer. And we want to reduce this to, 2. Let's look at 2. We really just want to get rid of the detail in her skin. And 2 is actually probably too much. So this is going to be something where literally every image is different. It depends on the size of your image. It also depends on how much of your image the skin texture is taking up. This image, just because, she only makes up, 25%
right.
of the overall pixels. The detail in her skin is much more fine than if you have a huge, beautiful beauty shot where it's, this woman's face and it's taking up, 90% of the pixels
right.
as you have.
Also,
it's going to be a little more.
Also, when I do a technique like this and I record it as an action, what I do for the specific reason is set this to be a stop. So it stops and asks me every single time, what do I want the blur to be? Because it's different on every single photo.
Exactly, and you can set your action to specifically go and open a menu option. So your action would stop right here.
Right, it will stop. You type in your number, hit go, and then it keeps going.
Exactly, great point. So Gaussian blur. So 1.3 is probably going to be good for this image. Maybe I'll knock it up a couple notches, 1.5, 1.6. I'm just looking at some of the detail that we didn't get rid of up in her forehead. And I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to turn on my sharpen layer. You can see obviously it takes all the blur away. I'm going to select sharpen, and I'm going to go image, apply image. And we're going to basically do the same thing that we did much earlier. I'll re-explain it for those of you that might have missed it. We're taking, well, number one, we want to apply to the low layer, not the blur layer. See, look at the difference that makes. Because this is our new layer. We're applying the overall merged image to this, I'm sorry, we're applying this sharpen layer, which is the overall image, to the low layer, which was that layer we burned. We're ticking on invert, and because it's a 16-bit image, I'm using the add blend mode with scale set to 2, offset set to 0. If you're using an 8-bit image, you want to go subtract, and you want to set scale to 2, offset to 128, and uncheck invert. You should have this very high-pass filter-looking effect that's appearing. But it's a 16-bit image. I'm going to roll with add, scale 2, offset 0. The reason between the difference in 8 and 16-bit, very complicated, very mathematical reason. So we're not really going to get into it right here right now. So with this layer now in place, we can apply this as an overlay layer, soft light layer. You can go linear light, which will be a very powerful sharpening. And you're not going to see much of a difference because we need to get rid of our low layer. So we need to delete the low layer. You can see that what we have is some extreme sharpening. In fact, probably a little bit too much. So we try something like vivid light, that's a little softer. Overlay is even softer. So before and after. So it's just a very, very nice sharpening overall. In fact, I'll probably go linear light, go really harsh because I can tone it back, mainly because I want to just quickly mask it to the red channel, which is, she's a white girl, Caucasian girl. There's a ton of red in her skin. So I know that if I load the red channel as a selection, in fact, I can go look at my channels, the red channel, you can see how like light her skin looks. That means that if I load the red channel as a selection, the whitest parts of the image are going to allow that layer to show through the most, whereas like down here in kind of the shadowy parts of her hair, I don't need as much sharpness. In fact, you don't really want sharpness because if you're sharpening your shadows, usually the only thing you're sharpening and accentuating is grain, it's noise, and that's just going to look bad anyway. So if we kind of help Photoshop out and really use one of these channels, you can see green, her skin is much darker, blue, her skin is even darker. So the red channel is perfect for us. So we want to load that as a selection and create a mask. I'm going to select my RGB composite layer again. Over here on the sharpen layer, we want to load that as a mask by hitting Command Shift Option and the number 3, I believe it is. And that's just, you can see Command 3, that'd be Control 3 on the PC, loads the red channel. You could also Command or Control click on the red channel, but I think it's cooler to use the hotkey. So once you have that selection, at this point, all you need to do is create a mask. So layer mask, and you would say reveal selection. What that's going to do, obviously, is it now looks like we literally have our channel there as the layer mask, which we do. In fact, let's just zoom in here and see what kind of difference it's making for us. So if I shift click the mask, there's with no mask, and if I apply the mask, you can see, number one, I mean, if I can draw your attention to it, just like look over here in this dark part of the image, shut the mask off, you see all that kind of like gritty, it looks like old-fashioned kind of dirty sharpening. You turn that mask on and it just beautifully fades back into the shadowy part of the image. Obviously, if you need a little bit more sharpness, there's a couple things you can do. You could duplicate the sharpness layer, or you could apply a levels adjustment to your mask. What do I mean by that? Well, we select the mask. We can simply go Image, Adjustments, Levels. What we want to do is we want to make all of the dark pixels in the image just a little less dark. By doing that, we reveal more of the sharpening. So you can do that by down here on the output level slider, just drag the black slider upward. See, if I drag it up a lot, we're getting a lot of that sharpness back. But if I just drag it up a little, it's going to just allow subtle amounts of that sharpening to come back in. Again, I'm just paying keen attention to my shadows because I really don't want them to start looking muddled and kind of dirty. So there we go, just like boosting the output level, the black slider on the output level slider to like 20 tends to work pretty well for this image. Again, this is all just going to depend on the varying levels of shadow, of brightness and darkness, highlight shadows in any given image. Now, because this was part of a series of photos, probably all the light is going to be about the same. They were all shot the same camera, same light, same time of the day, etc. So I could, bundle this together into a little action if I wanted, if I'm quickly processing a bunch of photos from this single shoot. But certainly knowing the technique is going to help you take that and apply it to any photo that you've shot, anywhere that you've shot it, at any time and get, pretty good results. So that'll pretty much do it for me.
All right. Thank you, Nathaniel. That was awesome. Any last minute questions for Nathaniel before he hops off and I continue with my own retouching, which we have the same goals but totally different techniques, and that's the beautiful part of Photoshop. Any questions for Nathaniel before he pops out?
I'm watching as well.
All right. So yeah, well, because there's a delay, so we'll give him a minute or two to respond.
Yeah, and whoever shouted out my channel, thank you. You can check out my tutorials. Yes, my YouTube username is TutVid. I don't have quite as many subscribers as Terry does, but I'll get there.
Oh, you'll get there, especially with being so good. You'll definitely get there.
All right, I see something that says question.
All right, here comes the question.
Thanks, guys. Mary, snake doctor? Snake doctor. Cool. How did you get started in your line of work? It's fairly simple. I grew up in a family installing flooring, and I just decided I didn't want to install floors anymore. And we used to take these big family vacations. I'm one of 8 kids, and family vacations were like, hey guys, get in the van, we're driving to Seattle. And we would drive around the country for 2 or 3 weeks. And I was always the kid that got the camera. So, and partially because I loved it. But, after like 10 days of having a camera bag on your shoulder as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, you're like, I'm done with this. But, I never really lost the itch. And I got out of photography for a few years. But then when I was like 18 or 19, I just decided one day, you know what, I want to start shooting weddings. So I put an ad on Craigslist. I shot a bunch of weddings for free to get my feet wet and kind of learn what it was all about. And some things in my life changed and shifted around, some for the good, some for the bad. And I decided it was time to, kind of adjust where I was headed with my photography. I still shoot maybe like 1 or 2 weddings a year. But the majority of what I do now is commercial portraiture. And it's, I don't know. I just picked something I wanted to do. I picked something I liked and just do it. There's nothing holding you back. You're holding yourself back. So just go out and do it. You know what I mean? And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. What I should have done was brought on some of my images from my very first ever photo shoots, particularly my first ever photo shoot with an off-camera flash, because they are comically bad. That would have been fun to share that.
So people are asking, do you stream here on Twitch, or is this your first time?
So I have a Twitch channel, _TutVid, but I have never streamed on Twitch before. I used to do a lot of like Google Hangouts on air. I've done a couple YouTube live type things, but I have had a lot of people asking me to get into Twitch. So I did start a Twitch channel. In fact, I'll make some comments, or maybe I'll comment right now. There, this is my Twitch. And that way people can see that it's my Twitch. If you want to follow, go ahead and follow. I don't know when I'm going to start streaming, but when I start streaming, I'll stream good stuff. I can promise that. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yes, thank you, Star Crunch. Shout out. The _TutVid. So, yes. And Terry, should I throw a shout out for this weekend as well?
Absolutely.
So I'm going out to San Francisco this weekend to do a big, I believe Adobe is calling it Weekend of Art, with a bunch of other super cool Twitch streamers and YouTubers. It's going to be like a 3-day thing. You can tune in virtually anytime during the day, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week. Most times during the day, we're going to be live and have somebody on air. I'm going to be on air quite a bit. A couple of the guys from Adobe and a couple of other really, really talented artists are going to be on air also as well. There's going to be there's a ton of people. There's going to be like 15 different streamers, and I'll be there among other people. And it's going to be totally free. So, and it'll be right here, right? Twitch.tv/Adobe, I believe. Everything will be streamed through it as well. So you guys should definitely check that out. There's going to be a whole bunch of people tuning in and watching it. It's going to be so much fun. Plus, I'm going to be out in San Francisco and flying across the country for it. So it's going to be a blast.
Awesome. All right, I think that's it. Everyone's loving what you did today. So thanks again for being my first guest on my stream, and hope to have you back. Sometimes I run out of things to stream about or think about or talk about, so it was great and refreshing.
Yeah, whatever you do,
Also, the thing about watching someone in Photoshop, I don't care how long you've been using Photoshop, how much you know about Photoshop, how many years you've spent studying the science behind Photoshop, you always will learn something new. So for me, my takeaway from today was I'm a spot healing guy, not a healing guy. So I will now give the healing brush more due credit, especially with the replace option for flyaway hair. That was my takeaway. So I will definitely use that technique from here on out. And I'll give you credit for it whenever I talk about it or show it.
Yes.
All right.
And guys, make sure you stick around for the next, 40 minutes or so?
Yeah, next 36 minutes, I'm going to do some more retouching. So with that said, thank you guys, or thank you, Nathaniel. Guys, stick around. I'm going to disconnect from him and switch things over.
Yes,
all right.
Everybody.
Cheers. All right. Thanks, man. Alrighty, looks like we're back. Mic's on, everything's on. Good. Alright, so, and by the way, thanks everybody. It was, hold on, feedback detected. Hold on for a second. Hold on. Yes. Let's turn that off. Okay. Thanks everybody for, I always learn something new just watching anyone do, if nothing else, I learn, even if it's a little thing or a lot of little things, I always learn something new watching anyone else use Adobe products because, especially with a product like Photoshop, there's so many different ways to do or accomplish the same task. So really, it's about technique and what techniques work best for you. So you'll notice that Nathaniel said a lot of times, he kind of I guess he's used to people saying, well, couldn't you do it this way? Couldn't you do it that way? He said, this is the way I do it, and I have found best to do it for me. So when people are showing their techniques, a lot of it is like a buffet. You pick and choose what will work best for you, and you leave the stuff behind that you say, well, I'm doing it a different way, and I like the way I do it better. So with that said, there are always going to be things that you will learn from when you watch someone in a product like Photoshop, and there will be things that you say, my audio, probably because it's too loud. Hang on, let me pull that back down. Okay, so how's that? Is that better? You'll just always have something that you can take away from it, and things that are useful to you, and things that you say, well, I'm doing it this way, and therefore I don't need to learn or use that particular technique. But with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into, actually, let me show you this first. Let me go here. All right, so over the weekend, I did a photo shoot. You might see a lot of these pictures also. Victoria was on set. She shot this was more of her shoot than it was mine. But one of those bucket list kind of things for a photographer is you always want to shoot something artsy. You want to shoot something elegant, and nothing's more elegant and artsy than, as far as a subject is concerned, than a ballerina. So this was from that ballerina shoot. I narrowed it down to 300 images, including some of the behind the scenes stuff. Now, of course, I won't use all 300, but these are the ones that were not the rejects. These are the ones that, the image wasn't, too dark, eyes weren't closed, things like that. So there are lots to choose from here. And what I've also done is I've also gone through and done my initial pass. So I'm here in Lightroom. If you see a green square around, or green thumbnail or green square around the thumbnail, those are some of my favorites. So I've already gone through and done my selections. The ballerina, the model here, has not made her choices yet. So there will be more to pick from. I'm going to show you a couple of things here in Lightroom before we move over to Photoshop. We'll do we'll do at least 1 or 2 retouches in the next 30 minutes. But one of the things that is just ongoing, especially as you're mixing DSLR images with mobile images, with scans, with however you're getting your images in, these first 6 or 7 images were taken with my iPhone, my new iPhone 7, by the way, 7 Plus. So I shot these. I shot these in RAW in Lightroom Mobile, because Lightroom Mobile is one of the few apps on the App Store now that can shoot in RAW with a 12 megapixel iOS device. So this is from my iPhone 7 Plus, and as a RAW file. And of course, the way I got it into Lightroom on my desktop was to sync it to a collection in Lightroom Mobile. So it added it to a collection, and then I moved it into this bigger collection of photos. So if I go to my edits, this was the collection that I've synced to Lightroom Mobile. So we can see here on the left-hand side, that's the one that's checked. And I've got all these behind-the-scenes shots that really weren't part of the edit. So what I want to do is, I had moved them already or copied them to the main gallery, but I didn't delete them from here yet, meaning this collection, because I wanted to point out something. All of the images I shot with my DSLR went to a specific drive and a specific folder. I shot tethered. So whether you import them in or whether you tether, they're going to go to wherever you locate them. So in this case, they're all in a folder called Maggie on my one of my internal drives. However, where did the Lightroom Mobile shots end up? Where did they go? Well, I showed this preference back when it first came out. I'll show it again here. But in Lightroom Mobile, you now have the ability to specify a specific folder for all your incoming photos. So I did that. I specified a folder on my hard drive in the pictures folder, and I just called it from Lightroom Mobile, meaning that's where those pictures are. So in other words, if I were to get out of this preference, right-click on one of those photos and say, go to the folder, it will take me to that folder, which is in a different spot. In other words, those Maggie pictures are not located in the same place as the DSLR Maggie pictures. And why that becomes an issue is eventually I'm going to archive that folder. I'm going to take that folder off my laptop, put it on my file server or my NAS drive or a backup hard drive, whatever, and it's not going to be on my laptop anymore. But these still would be, because these are just going to keep growing and growing and growing in that folder until you move them somewhere else. So what I want to do is I want to take all these behind the scenes Maggie shots, even though I'm dealing with the folder, it's not going to mess with the collections at all. And I'm going to just simply move them right here in Lightroom to the same drive or to the same folder on the same drive that the rest of the Maggie folders or photos are in. So right now it's physically moving them. And if I go to the Maggie folder, it's putting them in there. So they will be in that same drive in the same location so that everything ends up in a special spot or folder that I can then take away whenever I want. All right, so that was the first thing. So now if I go back to that collection, the Maggie edits, and I just left those in there for now. I don't know if I moved these though. I don't know if those are part of it. Let's just make sure. I'm going to move these just in case I didn't select them the first time. I can't remember. Now it can't move them twice, so either they're there or they're not, so they're already there. Okay. All right, so now that these have been moved, I can get rid of them out of this collection. I don't need them in this synced collection anymore because now they're in the broader collection and they're in the right spot on the hard drive. So I'm going to narrow it down to just these. Now the first 3 that I edited or retouched were these 3. So I'll show them to you full screen. That was this one, this one, and this one. And originally, I was going to only really do one of these. I kind of like these 3, and then I was going to just hit the letter N here in Lightroom, Shift Tab to get rid of the panels, and say, which one of these do I like best? And I was going to show them to someone and say, which one of these do you like best? And then when I looked at all 3 of them together, I was like, wait a minute. Those 3 shots together look great. Why would I narrow it down to just one? So what I wanted to do was put these 3 together. Now there's a million ways to do that in Photoshop. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you can also do it right here in Lightroom if you take advantage of the print module. So with that said, let's jump out. Let's bring panels back. I ended up putting together this. This became my final shot that as a matter of fact, I think I posted it today on my social media, on my Instagram and other places. So putting those 3 together, putting the black frame behind it with my watermark and all that at the bottom, or just identity plate at the bottom. That's how this was shown today for the first time. Now, how do you do that? How do you take these 3 and put them together? And then once you put them together, bring it back in to Lightroom so you can use it. So what I did was select all 3 of the shots that I wanted to put together after I edited each one. Then I went over to the print module. And of course you can see it here. But in the print module, I already had a template set up. So here are some of my templates. There's 3 up tall. And of course that doesn't really suit this, but you can still move them around in the various panels for whatever you want. Then I had a 3 up wide. That's the one I actually used. Now these are templates, and you're probably saying, well, Terry, I don't have all those. That's because I built each one of these. So here's a 4 up, which of course we don't have a 4th photo to show. 4 up 16 by 20. So I basically built all of these templates so that I can use them whenever I want, just like this, or actually more just like that. All right, so how do you do this? Now, this particular one didn't work. I actually had to modify it and make a different, I didn't save it, but to make a different one. Because I wanted her finger to show, but I also wanted her left leg to show, or her right leg to show as well. This one was, I wanted the toe to show, and this one I wanted kind of both toes to show. So these 2 are almost wide enough, but this one isn't. And basically the reason that this does not work is because this entire page is just too small. It's an 8 by, I set this up to be an 8 by 10. So if I were to print this out, then it would fit perfectly on an 8 by 10. But in reality, I may not ever print this. I just want it to look right. So what I did was I went into my page setup, and in the page setup in Lightroom, you have the option to do custom sizes. So even if you don't own a printer, you don't even own one, you don't have one attached, you can go in and make your own custom sizes. So I made a 24 by 16 page. Even though that really doesn't exist as a print size, I did this for a reason. 24 by 16, because I knew 20 by 16 was the same ratio as 8 by 10, so too small. So 24 by 16 would be a little wider and enough. And then of course you can name your custom page. So if you want to do one, you just click add, make your paper size whatever you want. So I did, let's do 34 by 20. Make it whatever you want. Now, of course, I don't need a margin. I'm not really printing this to a printer that has a specific margin. And then I can, of course, go in, double click the name and name it. So I can make this one 34 by 20. So you can make as many custom sizes as you want. Now that I've done that, I could just choose that as my paper size. So I did 24 by 16. And for whatever reason, the tall versus wide thing didn't work. So let's do tall, I think was the way I did it. Yeah. All right, so that gave me my, because I specified the page to be a wide page. So turning it wide in the dialog actually flips it the other way. So in this case, I should have done it, 16 by 24 and then made it wide. All right, but technically that would have been the right way to do it. All right, so that gives me the right paper size. Then over here in the layout, you specify how many columns you want, 3, 4, 5, 6, how many ever pictures you want to be able to put up next to each other. So of course I'm doing 3. Then you can specify the cell size, the height and the width. So I can make them wider, as wide as I want them to be, and as tall as I want them to be. And it will auto adjust the photos as needed. You can also put in your margins. So if you want the photos higher on the page, give it more of a bottom margin. You want it lower on the page or in the middle, then get rid of all the margins and just have it in the middle. It'll automatically center. So this is how I built that template. Now, once you build this the way you want, then all you have to do is go over, and I didn't do this yesterday, is just click on the template browser to create a new preset and name it whatever you want, and then that becomes your new preset for this new setup that you're doing right now. So in this case, I think I did the margins on the left a little bit more, so a 1/4 inch on the left, 1/4 inch on the right, 1/4 inch on the top, just to bring that a little bit more uniform. And we want to bring it up just a little bit more, and we want to make the cell width not that much, maybe something like that. Looks about right. All right, and of course you can still move the pictures inside. You don't have to worry about the position of the pictures for your template. Now, in order to get it to be, to get my identity plate there, I just checked off identity plate, so it would be there. And then you can also change your paper background color or your page color. So I changed it to black earlier on. I can make it gray, I can make it whatever color I want, or just make it white. It's up to you. So I used a black, hey, Jason's in the house. Beetlejuice is here. So I just made it black so it would fit. And then, of course, the only step I didn't do yesterday was I forgot to save it after I exported it. So let's do a save, and we're going to make this, what did I say, 24 by 16? 3 up. Or actually want to do 3 up to make it consistent. 24 by 16. All right, there we go. 3 up, 24 by 16. I guess some of them I spaced. And then where do I want to put it? I want to put it in my own templates folder. So there it is. There's my new template. Anytime I want this layout, I can now just choose it with any 3 photos. So if I go back and I now pick, let's get out of the, let's go here. And I now want 3 different photos. Let's say, I don't see one on the left that I would want, but okay, let's just pick one just for the sake of example. That one, and that one, and that one. Okay, so I picked those 3, head back to the print module, and then those 3 become the 3 shots this time. So it's really up to you how you do it. Now, once you're ready to make it real, in other words, all we're doing right now is in the print module, we're just sizing, playing around, picking different photos. So if I pick, and I can change these on the fly, by the way. So I can say, take that one off, put that one on instead, take that one off, put this one on instead. You can change these any way you want. Once you've done this, what makes it real is coming down here. And normally, Lightroom is set to go to a printer. So if I wanted to print these out, make my own print right now on my own printer, I would just hit print and out would come a print. But I don't have a printer in this room. I don't have one that I want to print this on. I don't have one that will print a size paper this big in the house. So I would just change it from printer to JPEG file. Once I change it to JPEG file, it will take whatever you build in the print module and make a new print or new image from it. So now I'm making a JPEG, file resolution 300 pixels per inch, so it's nice and big. I don't want to do any print sharpening because I'm not really printing it. And I can make the profile whatever I want. I'm going to make it Adobe RGB. Normally I would use that for print, or Pro RGB if I'm bringing it back into Lightroom, which I am. So now it just says print to file. So I'm going to say print to file, put it in the same folder as the rest of the images. So you can pick wherever you want it to go. And I'm going to say 3 up Twitch is the name of the file. So that way we know that's a different one. And then it's actually preparing the print job, which means it's exporting out a JPEG. That's all it's doing. Once that JPEG is exported out, that's it. That dialog or that progress bar will go away. We can go back to the grid. And now that is sitting in a folder. It's sitting in the same folder, but it's not in Lightroom. So to get it back into Lightroom, we're going to select the folder that has that image in it, and we're just going to say, we'll right click on it and say synchronize folder. When we synchronize folder, look, it says, hey, there's one new photo to bring in, because it recognizes there's something in that folder that's not already here in Lightroom. And I can say synchronize. And it will then say, oh, here's the new photo. Where do you want it? And as a matter of fact, while you're at it, go ahead and add it to that same Maggie Gallery collection or Maggie Edit collection. Let's bring it into the edits. And import it in. And now it's been added to that collection. And away we go. So if I go back to that same collection of edits that we were in a minute ago, right there, it's now a new image in that collection, and that new image is also being synced to Lightroom Mobile. So there's the new one, which these are all unretouched pictures, so I'm not really going to use that. And here's the one I did earlier. And you can make as many of those print templates as you want and use them to actually either generate real prints or export them as JPEGs to either just be used as photos or for uploading to print houses. So for example, I do a lot of printing via Costco because the prices are amazing and the quality is great too. So if I really wanted this to be a print on canvas or metal or whatever, I would just now take this JPEG and upload it to Costco because it's already set up the way I wanted it to be printed. So I do this all the time. This is one of the primary ways I get images ready to be printed. All right, so we got 15 minutes left. Let's do a quick retouch. So let's go back to the main gallery here. Let's go back in and grab one of my favorites. So I'm just going to narrow it down to the favorites of my favorite choices so far. And let's do one that's a little bit of a challenge in terms of... Now, the problem with this particular shoot is actually wasn't a problem for her, it was a problem for me. The problem with this particular shoot is this model walked in way taller than I expected her to be. She was actually 6 feet, not standing on her tippy toes. So on her toes, she's like 6.5 feet. So this is like, wow, I was like, what am I going to do here? So I had to raise the background. I had to do all kinds of things just to make her fit on, because she has such a presence to make her fit. So anyway, what I'd love to do now is go in and, so let's see, curious, how many photos are in your Lightroom catalog and how big is your catalog? Library and catalog, same thing in this case, and it's about 190,000 photos. All right, so anyway, well, we can actually go look. 191,000 photos. So let's go take care of this photo and bring it in. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit the develop module on it. And I think I did a lot of this already. As Nathaniel said, I like to do my a little bit of sharpening up front at least. Whether I do more later or not is questionable. But Lightroom has a great sharpen faces and sharpen scenic algorithm that in this case protects the skin texture of the face and does not harm the skin. And I've already gone in and I've adjusted my whites, blacks, although there's a little bit of shadow clipping there. We can go ahead and just drag right here in the histogram to take care of that. There's a big giant highlight warning right there, which we can go ahead and take care of that. And I'll add a little bit of vibrance. Not going to add any clarity. And I think I've already done my lens corrections. I've already done lens corrections. I've already done everything else. So now let's go ahead and simply open this photo up. So what I want to do is Command E on Mac, Control E on Windows. That will take the raw file over to Photoshop where I can now do more to it. Now, there's two ways to approach the biggest problem I see right off the bat. The background wasn't all the way or inside the frame. So there's a little bit of space left there. And the bigger problem is her hands are almost at the very top of the background. So I could have done this one of two ways. I could simply crop the image down because I wouldn't be cropping anything of her off and crop it from the side and I'd be all set. Or if I want to keep the frame the same size, then what I need to do is fill that area that's already there. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this line at the top, which is kind of the roll of paper. We can see the very top of it. So let's get rid of that first, and then we'll worry about the side. Now, there's a couple ways I can do this. I can either clone it out, patch it out, paint it out because it's all white. Lots of ways I can do this. Let me just go ahead and grab a rectangular marquee tool. I'm not going to go all the way. Actually, I could go all the way to the edge. It wouldn't matter. I'll get as much of this as I can right here. And switch to the patch tool. Even though I didn't draw it with the patch tool, now that I'm in the patch tool will work. So that will go ahead and patch that out. Same thing on this side. I can use just a rectangular marquee because it's faster. And we'll just go ahead and we can come down as far as that. Now this is not going to work because it's a little higher. But that's okay. We can select, we can transform the selection and rotate it to be the same angle and move it up. So now we're just rotating the selection. We're not actually moving any pixels. Okay, so now we got that in place. We'll hit enter, we'll grab our patch tool and we'll just patch it down. Ooh, I'm gonna grab some of the hand there, but that's okay. Right there. All right, so we got rid of that. And then it's just a matter, we can do the same thing here, and we don't have to drag it straight down. We can drag it anywhere where there's enough white, like there, and get rid of it that way. Same thing on this side, we get rid of that corner, pull it down. That's why I love the patch tool so much. Okay, next up. So now we're gonna take care of the side. One of the easiest ways of taking care of the side is to use what we already have. So kind of, even though it's seamless, there could be some shadowing and things going on here. So what I'm going to do is grab, again, another rectangle. I'm going to get close to the edge, or maybe not, maybe right here. Grab that rectangle. Command J, which will duplicate that rectangle onto its own layer. So that's basically just the rectangle all by itself. And now we'll just free transform it. Command T, Control T on Windows, and just pull it over. That will be used to cover that up perfectly. All right, so that was, again, just a quick, maybe not so quick, but seamless way of fixing your seamless issues where you have not enough background and you need to accommodate for blank space or spots where you missed it. And I still think there's a bit of an issue up there. Let me go ahead and pull it down one more time. Okay. That should have done it. Okay, next up. So the next thing I would look for is, now I got the background all set. So we got 9 minutes left. What else? What can I do real quick? I would go in and start looking for some of those blemishes and things that you might not see far away, but you will see close up. So we'll go ahead and take care of some of those. All right, let's go ahead. And using my, this time I'm going to use the regular healing brush. Oh, let me turn touch off. There we go. Regular spot healing brush, which is my favorite, even though I could be convinced after seeing Nathaniel to use the regular healing brush more. I like it because it is picking up the surrounding pixels. And yes, it does mess up sometimes, but for me, it messes up a lot less than the time it takes for me to have to sample new areas every single time. So again, it's a personal preference. Now, one of my pet peeves is, for example, her ears are pierced in multiple places, which is great. But if there are spots where there's no earring, like in other words, she just didn't put an earring in that spot, then I don't want to see the hole. So even though that is there, we're going to take it off, because when she has an earring there, we'll see the earring, but I don't want to see the empty space. All right, so we got that. Now, I did not duplicate the layer first. I could have, but that would be a sign of I'm going to make a mistake that I want to go back and fix later. And no, I'm just kidding. I was going to say it on perfect, which I am far from perfect. But, see, yeah, I'm far from perfect right there. But no, if you need to duplicate the layer because you may want to come back and continue working on this or have a fail safe to get back to, by all means do it. In my case, my fail-safe is the original raw file, which is going to be untouched. So if I ever need to go all the way back, I can always go back to that. All right, just getting rid of some of the stubble there. And there's always a little hair somewhere. All right. Okay, fingers look good. Everything else looks good. I see some more of that background there. All right, so now let's use the stray hair method that Nathaniel taught. I kind of like it. So this time I am going to create a new layer, just an empty layer. I'm going to switch from my favorite, the spot healing brush, to just the regular healing brush tool. And I'm going to set it, which I've already done, on from normal, which is what it's normal on, to replace. And I want to sample, instead of the current layer, all layers. Because if I sample the current layer, there's nothing on it. It's not going to really work. I'm going to bring down my brush size. And once I bring down the brush size, in this case, because you're using the healing brush instead of the spot healing brush, you do have to pick a spot where you're sampling from. So I'm going to sample from the background and then start removing some of the stray hairs. And I can't, see, that's why I don't like doing it that way. But anyway, there we go. I do kind of like this method for stray hair. So thank you, Nathaniel. I always love it when I can pick up something that will help my workflow. Now, what I would have done had I not been doing this is I would have used either patch tool, healing brush, and a combination of the clone stamp tool. So the clone stamp tool, in my opinion, would kind of give me the exact same results that I'm getting now. But for whatever reason, his method seemed to feel better. So I'm going to try this method. And it's doing a nice job. All right, we got 4 minutes left before Sid's up. So much retouching, so little time. But you get the idea. I can continue going around. There's a few more stray hairs at the top. One thing I do want to point out, if we go back to that original layer, let me switch back to the regular spot healing tool. Her hair is brushed to the side, obviously. But there are a lot of times where you'll always have that 1 or 2 hairs that kind of wants to go against the grain, like this one. So this one's kind of like tilting down. And I'll just kind of, sometimes you can get away with 1 stroke, sometimes you can't. But it really just depends on the size of the brush and whether or not this tool will cooperate. But a lot of times it can take away that stray hair without damaging the hairs that are going the opposite direction. And so I'll use that to kind of clean this up. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. So be prepared to either undo it or have to do more strokes than just 1. But just kind of getting rid of some of those hairs that go against the grain. All right, let's see. Yeah, got 1 more here. Those hairs that go against the grain. And the ones that are on the ears. All right, looks good. Now, because she's a dancer, dancers fall a lot, so she's going to have way more bruises on her legs than the average person. See, that's years of dancing right there. All right, so we go in and kind of just do what we've been doing. Kind of just clean up some of these blemishes, bruises, marks from years and years and years and years of dancing. To get this good, you're going to fall. And you're going to fall often. And you're going to have bruises. And you're going to have damage. You're going to have things done. But that's the price of being good. Then you got little things like these coming off the sides of the shoe. That's why the spot healing brush is my friend and one of my favorites. All right. Good. Yes, the price of perfection, actually. Absolutely. It almost looks like a cut. It's just a wrinkle. Now, I'm not going to completely remove all of this, but just lessen it a little bit. All right, got 1 minute left. Sid, are you ready to go? What are you going to talk about? Yeah, let's zoom out. All right. I would now, if I'm not done, but I would save it once I'm done, close it, and when I return back to Lightroom, it's going to be right next to the original. And again, that's why I don't worry too much, because I know that original is there for me to go back to. So with that said, my time is up. Thanks everyone for watching me. I'll be back on this Friday. Oh, iOS 10 stickers. I'm going to be back this Friday at 10 a.m. and doing more of this, probably more retouching on these photos. So if you like what you're seeing now, come back and join me on Friday. Next up, Sid, take it away.